Welcome, folks, back to Dominant Mets Nation. And we got some big news today. Munetaka Murakami goes off the board, signing a 2-year deal with the Chicago White Sox. What a surprise. The Chicago White Sox getting in on the big free agents, signing Murakami to a 2-year, $36-37 million deal. It looks like Murakami is going to be making about 16.5 mil a year, a lot lower than experts, prognosticators expected. So I know probably Mets fans out there who are looking to replace the offensive production of Nimmo, Pete Alonso. Uh, you got a lot of production supposedly from Murakami, but that was not an option that David Stearns turned to. Why is that? Well, we're going to go over that because it's actually fairly obvious why Murakami had some trouble signing with clubs this offseason. Today, we're also going to talk about some very hot and heavy rumors involving Luis Robert Jr. to the New York Mets. And also, too, lately, there is a lot of talk. Tatsuya Imai, does he have a future with the Mets? Well, we'll get into it as well. Before we get started, if you could like, subscribe, if you're an MLB baseball fan, Mets fans particularly, we love for you to join the family. Any comments, also drop them down below. We love that as well. Okay. All right. So the big news to start off with, Murakami going off the board. Now, Murakami had about a couple hours essentially to sign. Yes, tomorrow is Monday, and he had up until 5 p.m. Monday to sign with any major league team. Otherwise, he would have went back to Japan. So he was running up against the clock, and time was ticking. As of yesterday, you heard that the White Sox were a potential destination for the home run mashing Murakami. Early on, a lot of people thought, hey, is he a potential fit with the Mets? The Mets looking to replace a lot of offense. And when I say replace Nimmo, replace Pete, that's just to get the status quo. A lot of Mets fans particularly thought the Mets needed to not only be at status quo, but be better than last year. Better than last year. Thus far, we have Simeon and we have Polanco added to the lineup. So again, I don't even think we're close to being at status quo. So again, was that a guy that would have ever fit the lineup? Okay, so according to Jeff Passan, the White Sox, they were willing to take a chance on the young power hitter. Obviously, the White Sox are not where the Mets are. They're not looking to make the playoffs. They're not looking to build a World Series team. They could essentially take a lottery ticket in a guy like Murakami to build around or stay within the framework of their team, a young up and coming team, and far from where they want to be. They want to be a playoff contender, but they're not a playoff contender, right? So you could take a chance on a guy who defensively is hugely suspect. And I don't think that was what would scared away teams, because obviously if teams were afraid of a guy that couldn't play defense but was a slugger, a guy like Kyle Schwarber wouldn't have got $150 million at age 33. So it wasn't that. It was the fact that you had a guy with a very unproven bat, and he has all the power in the world. He slugged his exit velocity was in the 90th percentile, which would have slotted in on the top of Major League Baseball. But the fact is, the guy struck out way too much. But not only that, there was one particular number that was extremely ugly, extremely beyond ugly. And this is why when I saw this number and when this number was floated across, along with one other fact, there was no way. And even at this low price 2-year, less than what Polanco got. Polanco got 2 years, 20 mil a year, 40 mil total. A lot of Mets fans are probably like, hey, I would have taken Murakami any day and every day over Polanco. But I'll tell you, there's one stat that we're going to go over very shortly that I'm pretty sure most fans would think twice once they realize this stat. Now, there was a lot of speak that Murakami had trouble with the fastball. Not just the fastball 98, 99, 100 miles per hour. No, he had trouble with the fastball over 93 miles per hour, right? Virtually most major league pitchers throw above 93 miles per hour. Only probably a very select few, work with guile, work with location, work with movement, work below that. Tyler Rogers, he's more of the exception. So, okay, he has trouble with 93 mile per hour or more in the fastball. But here's the stat that I think once this came to fruition, I don't think he would ever be a Met. And I think right now what he's doing, going to see if he can prove to hit Major League Baseball, do that for a couple of years. You're 27, you hit the open market in a few years. Once you've proven yourself, then you can get that long-term contract at the high average annual value there. That's thing. Okay, so the thing is his zone contact percent. So the amount of pitches that are in the zone that he makes contact with was putrid, pathetic. It was about 72%, which would have been, according to the StatCast that I was looking at, he would have been the second lowest zone contact in Major League Baseball. I mean, the guy just wasn't making contact. So his number was 72%. So that means when the ball is in the strike zone, he only makes contact 72% of the time. For example, I think Pete Alonso was around 83%. Juan Soto was around 83%. So much, much higher. I mean, for all of you who are saying, I would have traded the home run, the potential. If the guy's not making contact, if he's striking out in big situations, and you don't make contact with the ball, things can't happen. I'll give you an example. Jorge Polanco, the gentleman that we just paid 2 years, $40 million. His zone contact percentage on average, so he some years better, some years worse, is 86.8. So almost 87. So you have Polanco who makes contact 87% of the time when the ball is in the strike zone versus Murakami, only 72. One of the worst, the second worst in baseball for last year. So, and then if you look at Polanco, he's had some years zone contact 90.3, 91.1, 90.9, 89.4, 89.6. Last year, most recently, it was 86 on the dot. But on average, he has made zone contact percentage 87% of the time. So again, for good things to happen, even in little league, they say this. You got to put the ball in play. And this is why teams swayed away from Murakami. This is why he is going to the White Sox of all teams. Any competitive team knows that the player, if they're not good defensively, they got to put the ball in play to be successful offensively. So that's just bottom line. This is why he's going to the White Sox of all places to prove to everybody else he could do it. And the thing he has on his side is he is young, but again, he doesn't have one attribute about himself that is elite besides the home run element, but that also involves making contact. So this is why he's going to the White Sox. And this is why if you're a Mets fan, I wouldn't be, jumping out the window. Although, there is something right now with guys coming off the board, and you hear the Mets throughout the last month or so were linked to a lot of names and still linked to a lot of names. Framber Valdez linked to Cody Bellinger, Kyle Tucker, Mason Miller, Nick Pivetta. Now we're going to talk about Luis Robert Jr. Michael King. The other day we were linked to him as well. Next two guys we're going to talk about, the Mets surprisingly are linked to them, Luis Robert Jr. and Tatsuya Imai, so stay tuned for that. But you know what? It is very interesting as the players tick off the board. I think it's very important to kind of I'm trying to figure out, okay, what was great about Jorge Polanco. And again, I wasn't really looking at zone contact percentage, but looking at Jorge Polanco, I mean that he's in the top part of the league. In fact, his zone contact percent on average. Let me give you an impressive thing about him. So Mr. Juan Soto's average for his career zone contact percent. So the amount of contact he makes when the ball's in the strike zone, he makes contact on his average MLB average 84.5% of the time. So even Jorge Polanco, his average is almost 87. He makes more contact within zone pitches than Juan Soto. So I mean that was an interesting statistic. And again, Jorge Polanco, again, he's a switch hitter. He's versatile in the field. He hasn't played first base, but you know what? The Mets and David Stearns, they are looking at things that more than what we are looking. They are looking at beyond the numbers. And again, I'm just very, very interested to see how this team is going to land up. Now, a guy that we're not really too surprised to hear about, Luis Robert Jr. to the Mets. And again, you're hearing a lot of speculation. Again, there are a lot of insiders connecting this guy to the Mets, especially since the trade went down, since the White Sox signed Murakami. One of the things I did see about Murakami with the White Sox, you heard early on that a possible return would include Mr. Mark Vientos, possibly playing DH for the White Sox. Is he that much of a valued commodity to the White Sox now? I looked at what the White Sox are looking for, and it mostly looks like they are looking for young starting pitching. So we have a whole slew of young starting pitching in the minors. I'm not talking about anything on the lines of Jonathan. So anything, if the White Sox are looking at the Jonathan, even a Brandon Sproat, I'm not doing it. I'm just really not doing it for a guy in Luis Robert Jr. And I did his 5-year profile here. and guys, I want to think, girls, I want to think beyond the numbers. So what does a guy like David Stearns, what does he tout, right? We all know, like, he looks at value. Like, it's all about value. If we can get Clay Holmes, if convert him from a reliever to a starter, okay, that's value. All right, you get a guy like Jorge Polanco, he wasn't a first baseman. Hey, maybe he can be a power first baseman. Maybe he can hit 30 home runs. Now you got him at 20 mil. You slide him back and forth. You got him for a 2-year deal. Let's see if we can get some value. But one of the things that I don't want to undervalue is availability. Now you have a guy, Robert Jr., who has 2 years left in his contract. Both of them are team options. Both of them are team options for 20 mil. So let's just say, if he plays well, you can have him for 2 years at 20 mil a year. Now, in the last 5 years, the amount of games that he averages are 104 games a year. 104. Why is that? Well, he's been often injured. So you're not trading for a guy like Pete Alonso who averages, and this is sick, Pete Alonso, and a lot of people, you compare everything to Pete Alonso. Well, Pete Alonso has done great in a lot of different categories. Like availability is one of them. Pete Alonso in the last 5 years averages 158 games. So again, let's keep that into perspective. We're trading for a guy who literally averages a tad over 100 games a year. So what am I giving back? Well, besides his on the field production, which has diminished, his availability is suspect, just more than 108 games a year. And am I that scared of it? Well, I wouldn't be that scared of it because I have a whole slew of prospects. I'm going to say a whole slew of prospects in the minors that could play center field, that could play outfield. Right. So, I mean, I am intrigued. Even if he is there for 100 games, I have Tyrone Taylor. I have AJ Ewing. I have Carson Bench. I have Jet Williams. I even have Nick Morabito, who could play pretty solid defensive center field. So I'm not going to run away. Like if I can get Luis Robert Jr., a guy with some upside for, some pretty good value, let's just say, hey, I'm going to give up somebody they like, somebody the White Sox like, from maybe a top 20 prospect, and the Mets see him as, okay, it's mediocre value, that's something I would really consider. I'm not considering anybody who I feel can be a top end starter. No way, no how, no way, no how. And again, not even a Brandon Sproat, and people project Brandon Sproat to be at best a number three. Most people say he's going to be a number four, number five. I mean, that's just me. And the reason why is Brandon Sproat right now is major league ready. So I value that. I really value that. The Chicago White Sox don't essentially need a pitcher who's major league ready. So if it's an A baller, maybe a double A guy who, a guy has a potential to be a three at number four. Okay, that's about the value I would give up for Luis Robert Jr. based on his availability, based on the fact that he has 2 years left, based on the fact that he's often injured. That's my top end value. Right, that is my top end value. And again, knowing that you're only going to get him for 100 games a year. So again, comment down below, like, what would you be willing to give up? Are you in the Luis Robert Jr. hunt? Is that even somebody that you would be willing to give any assets for? Do you think that he would be a good fit on the New York Mets? I'd like to know your opinions as well. Okay, so while I am a little kind of strict on what I want to give up for Luis Robert Jr. is because I'm a guy who, again, I value availability. I value availability so much, so much. And again, being available, that affects your productivity just by virtue of you not playing a bunch of games. But also, if you're not there or you get injured a lot, it hurts the fact of if you can ever get into a groove and be consistent. So again, I do value that. But on the flip side, I do value what you have in Robert Jr., a guy who has done it in the past, been an elite offensive guy and an elite defensive guy as well. A guy who has won a Gold Glove, a guy who's been in the top running for MVP. But also, again, what does he do to the Mets? Well, again, he allows time for some of the youngsters that I mentioned earlier to be ready. You have some holes to fill with Brandon Nimmo not being there. Brandon Nimmo is always a guy that, okay, mostly you're going to play him in left, but he could play center if needed, although that's not the best. But now you can put a guy like Benj in left. You can put Robert Jr. in center, and he's an elite defensive center fielder. He provides insurance for Benj, again, if he's not ready. He allows the Mets to flex the youngster to left field. Robert's range, his outs above average he had outs above average of 7 this past season, and that ranked in the 93rd percentile. So again, I don't want to take anything away from him. Also, the offensive game has really experienced significant regression over the last 2 years. But in 2023, that's his big highlight year: 38 home runs, 80 RBIs, 857 OPS. Since then, his average has gone down. But to be fair, that year in 2023, he has played the most games. I believe, that year he has played the most games by far. So if the Mets feel that they can have him or keep him healthy, that's also something to consider. Now, the idea of including Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat, to me would be, again, something I would not consider. Again, I told you what I would consider, but I also want to let you know that Luis Robert Jr. does have value specifically to the New York Mets. Now, if you include Luis Robert Jr. as an addition to the offense, that would include Marcus Semien. That would include Luis Robert Jr. Those two guys are Gold Glove. Those two guys are up the middle. I've emphasized when we specifically got Marcus Semien that the Mets are working on building up the middle. Gold Glove and Lindor, Gold Glove and Semien, Gold Glove and Luis Robert Jr. I like it. I like it. I like it. Tyrone Taylor, backup, Gold Glove potential. He guys a very high level, always rated in the high rankings in terms of defensive metrics. Tyrone Taylor. So again, you are very, 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 very strong up the middle. Very strong up the middle. I will repeat again. And also, good thing about him is you potentially have him for multiple years. until your youngsters are ready. And again, I said you have a whole slew of youngsters from AJ Ewing to Nick Morabito to Jet Williams to Carson Bench. So again, it's not like, hey, if at the end of the day, if it turns out to be a bust, at least he'll buy you some time. At least he will buy you some time. It's just going to come down to cost. Come down to cost. And like I was actually about to allude to, so Robert Jr., you added Polanco, you added Simeon. I still believe you would need one more addition. If the Mets' last addition would be a Bellinger, I mean, that might be a little tough because, hey, where do you put Benj? But, okay, the Mets, that's their job to make it work. That is their job to make it work. Or you know what? That might be their last addition, and then they focus on the pitching. Okay, so speaking about the pitching, there are some rumors that, and again, take it for what it is because the insiders have linked the Mets to everyone. I mean, again, when the Brandon Nimmo trade went down, you heard at that time, oh, the Mets are in talk with Frambo Valdez, 7 years, 210 million. Some people had it up to 218 million. And then all of a sudden, Jorge Polanco was signed. And at that time, oh, wow, the Mets and the Padres, they have something brewing. Mason Miller, Nick Pivetta, half of the bullpen might be coming back to the Mets. The Mets are building a package around Jonah Tong. Again, what we've seen thus far is that anything that's come to fruition with the Mets or anything that's actually transpired, any trades, any signings, is stuff that really isn't spoken about. It's stuff that comes out of nowhere. So, I mean, again, anything that I hear that's dragged through the rumor, I'm kind of like looking at it with a side eye. I really am. I mean, like, on this channel, Offseason Central, I mean, this specific, rumors, this and that. We haven't really done a lot of rumors this offseason, partly because I've been frustrated, but partly because a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past, I've actually believed that the Mets had a legit chance of signing said players. Now, based on what's happened, the Mets obviously need some upgrades. They haven't added any pitching. So, right now, I would believe that after the White Sox got Murakami, now they would be looking to shed somebody like a guy who's older, often injured, and who has 1 or 2 years left. I wouldn't be surprised if they finally pull the trigger and the Mets right now seem like a team. Kick my dog. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You okay? You okay? You okay? Come here. Oh, I kicked my dog. You okay? See, she always lays underneath me. Oh, how do you feel about the Mets? Are you a Met fan? Look. Okay, so getting back to it. So Tatsuya Amai, all right, you're all right. You're all right. You're all right. You're all right. You're okay. Okay. All right, Brittany. Good girl. All right. Okay. All right, so I gotta watch out. Okay, so again, Tatsuya Amai, future with the New York Mets. So again, let's look into that right now. So again, there are several free agents other than Amai. I would consider Amai the best free agent left. There's still trade candidates left, but you still got Frambo Valdez, you still got Ranger Suarez, and you still got Zach Gallen. The Mets right now, I guess our best pitcher. I mean, not I guess. I would 100% put Nolan McClain as the best pitcher. It's just like I'm reluctant because the guy only pitched a handful of games, but talent wise, he's got the best stuff. But for him to have the weight of the world on his shoulders again, I would still need, in my opinion, I still think the Mets need two top end of the rotation guys. Now, Tatsuya Omai was my number one guy that I wanted the Mets to get. That was my guy that I wanted the Mets to get, and then I wanted them to also get a guy like Michael King or Freddie Peralta. Now, Amai, I thought would be too much money, so I subbed out Tatsuya Amai for Freddie Peralta, the Mets could make a trade, build a package around Jonah Tong, get a Freddie Peralta, sign him for the next 5-6 years. That's your head of the rotation. Then you sign a Michael King on a 1 or 2 year deal. So that was my projection. But in an article, December 19th, so a day and a half ago, you had Mark Feinstein. He conveyed that one free agent pitcher may have the Mets' interest more than everybody else. So the lone exception, and this is in quotation, is Imai, who turns 28 on May 9th. So essentially, he'll be 28 years old this upcoming season. So he's fairly young. He is fairly young. The right-hander, we all know, was phenomenal, posted that 1.92 ERA, 164 innings last season with the Cebu Lions. The fourth straight season, his ERA has been below 3. Now you have the Cubs, the Yankees. They've been considered favorites to sign Imai, though other teams, including the Mets and the Red Sox, have also been connected to him. I mean, I'd really be surprised if the Red Sox sign him. I mean, the Red Sox already made a few additions to the starting rotation. Besides last year, they got Garrett Crochet. I mean, I'd give them all the credit in the world if they invested the money it takes to get an Imai, but I mean, I really wouldn't include them as front runners. But again, give them credit because they have been aggressive. Okay, so the Mets being mentioned by Feinstein bodes well for them because there were some reports that Imai was likely deciding between the Yankees and the Cubs, but that sentiment seems to be premature. As Feinstein alluded to, the Mets might need to act fast if they want to secure Imai's services. And here's the reason why. Obviously the Mets need to act fast because of the fact that we're already at almost Christmas, almost the end of December, and we haven't added any guys to the starting rotation. And that was our weakness last year. So again, that is a little concerning just on that big aspect. But Amai's posting window expires on January 2nd. January 2nd. So, wow, we have more than a week, so almost 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, before the posting window expires on January 2nd, which means he has till then to sign, or else he goes back to Japan's NPB league. So again, it is interesting. It is interesting. I mean, the Mets, have they doled out a big contract this offseason? No, they haven't. They really haven't. I mean, the biggest money they've taken back is the Simeon money, but that essentially is a reduction in the Brandon Nimmo 5-year deal. So that doesn't really count on anything. You actually just reduced years and money from Nimmo. So the biggest money they've taken on is Polanco and Devin Williams. Devin Williams, 3 years 51 or 3 years 45 with the signing bonus. So again, $40-50 million, they've given those two contracts out to Polanco and Devin Williams. That's been the biggest money. So no big money have the Mets doled out this offseason. No long-term contracts have the Mets dealed out this offseason. So for the Mets to be in the running for Imai, and again, do things happen? What happened to Murakami, where MLB, where the MLB teams are afraid about some aspect of him where they need him to prove himself before they give him a long-term contract. I don't think so with pitching. I really don't. I mean, I think that teams will take over a 3-year offer. I'd be surprised if the Mets can get him for a 3-year, let's just say $75 million offer. I'd be surprised. I think there will be a team that goes over 3 years. I think there will be teams that, will meet his asking price. And, he's asking for a lot longer than that. So the Mets would have to do some type of, long-term deal, and they would have to go beyond where they're comfortable right now. But again, like the Mets have already kind of indicated in the past, for certain players, a pitcher who's not in his 30s, who's still 28 years old. So you have his age 28, his age 29, age 30-year-old season, 31, 32. So you got 5 years left in his prime. You got 5 years left in his prime. I mean, there is uncertainty where you don't know how he's going to translate to the majors. But again, I guess that's where you got to rely on your scouts. He has personally been scouted by David Stearns himself. And then you go from there. So a 5 year deal for a guy like this, 5 6 year deal is not out of the realm of craziness based on his age. It's really not. So again, what's the Mets' willingness to do it, and is this the guy that they're holding their money back on? And will they pull the trigger for a long term deal? I'd like to see it. I certainly will. I think the Mets need that top end starter. I certainly do. And in fact, I wouldn't stop there. I would not stop there. I mean, this offseason will look a whole lot different to me if the Mets got an Imai, then they swung a trade for Peralta. So you invest money in getting, there are experts who say, oh, the top. I mean, I had Imai as the top pitcher on the market in terms of potential, in terms of what he has. So if you get an Imai, I would still get a Freddie Peralta, Nolan McLean. I mean, like the whole offseason, in my opinion, looks completely different if you do that. If you do something like that. And then like they got a Luis Robert Jr. I mean, and they got Devin Williams, Luke. I mean, it's something that the offseason starts to look much, much better in my eyes. And again, I can understand, what you are valuing. You are certainly valuing run prevention. If you get those two top pitchers, if you get Robert Jr., if you get Simeon, and if you shed Nimmo and you shed Alonso, then you've been true to your word about run prevention, because that all those moves scream run prevention, run prevention, run prevention. And again, this would cost a lot of money, but let's just say the Mets ended the offseason like this. Get a Tetsuya Amai, they get a Freddie Peralta, they make the trade with Luis Robert Jr. for Luis Robert Jr., and they get a Cody Bellinger. They get a Cody Bellinger to play first base. I mean, like, how would we feel? I mean, I would feel that our team is highly versatile. I would feel that our team is a very, viable team to compete at a high level. You put Robert, I'm sorry, you put Robert. Well, let's not start with center field. DH, you got Polanco. First base, you got Bellinger. Second base, Simeon. Shortstop, you got Lindor. Beatty at third. Alvarez behind the dish. Center, you got Robert Jr. Right, you got Soto. And left, I mean, still gives you an opportunity to have the kids down there. Benj, Jet Williams. I mean, that's very good around the diamond. And then not to mention your starting rotation is starting to really look nasty with Imai topping off. And then you got, you could put Freddie Peralta in the number 2 spot, or you can put him as number 1. Then you got Nolan McLean, take a lot of pressure off him. Then you can have some fun at the end of the rotation. You could really have some fun. You can have, and I'm going to talk about something very soon. So 4, you can have Peterson. 5, you can have Manaya. You can have Kodai Sanga. You can have, Tyler McGill's still there. Clay Holmes is still there. So what this is giving you is an opportunity, because I know there's going to be some people out there. Oh, Bellinger, 30 mil, Mamai, 25, 30 mil. It's a lot of money. Well, it still gives you an opportunity now where you have all this extra excess pitching. You could trade away a Sanga, to get a nice bullpen piece, to get a nice, maybe a starting pitcher, maybe 2 years away, young piece. I think a guy like Kodai Senga has value, folks. I believe a guy like Kodai Senga has value, and now you can shed $15 million, get a valuable piece back. Gives you that option by signing Imai, by trading for Peralta. Also, you can even go as far as, if you have confidence in Manaya, you have confidence in Clay Holmes, you can even explore the market on Peterson. You can certainly explore the market on Peterson. He's only making $7.75 million. It'll only make it $7.75 million. A lefty coming off an all-star season. Of course, he struggled a little at the end, but he was in an innings territory, which he's never pitched that many innings. I think you can get some value for him. I certainly do. Like the prices on some of these starting pitchers is insane. And then also, I mean, even if you got to unload him, McNeil, see if you can get anything for him. Anything for him. And at the end of the day, 31, you're almost shedding $40 million. Even if you don't, let's assume you don't eat any payroll, that's $40 million that you save. So, I mean, even right now, if we're at 310, Because again, I said that the Mets, I projected them to have about a $350 million payroll. Last year, they were between 330 and 340. But let's just do this exercise. So you take on Luis Robert Jr., you go from, I believe we're at 307. So you go from 307 to 327. Then I said you're going to do Bellinger. So Bellinger is going to be around 30 million. That takes you to 357. And then you sign an Imai. So let's just say 20. Okay, so that gets you to 385. You give Imai around 30 million. So you get all those players, you're at 385. Now you minus the 40 mil that I just said you could trade, and you're at 345 mil. 340, 345, right where the Mets were last year. So this is a viable plan. You got a great starting rotation. Your defensive alignment got so much better. Your offense, I think, could be argued as better. Hey, Benj comes onto the scene. The guy turns into what you think he is. Luis Robert, Jr., he comes to a team where it's a winning team. I think that makes a huge difference. You got Juan Soto leading the charge. You got Bellinger protecting, being protection in the lineup. You got Lindor, great two-way player. Beatty continues to progress. Alvarez essentially has no pressure on him. The guy has time to heal over the offseason. Again, no pressure. And then also he's got a very good backup, behind him. So again, no pressure on Alvarez. I like it. I really do. Simeon too. Any production you get from him, that's going to be a great bonus. He could be that leader in the clubhouse. He could be that leader in the clubhouse. I don't know. That's a viable offseason plan that is still possible. And the New York Mets still could stay right within their payroll window. And the thing, I think it's very important to have, a budget. I think if there's no pressure and you can spend 400-500 million, then you don't put value on moves. You really don't. And you set yourself up for disaster. And I think that's what happened when we had Billy Epler, especially in 2023, where we were spending money, at a ridiculous rate, but we didn't value anything. We didn't have any signature. Our team wasn't a defensive team. We were just going all over the place. Now, at least Stearns is targeting a direction. It's going to be in the name of run prevention, flexibility, versatility from players. And then he's opening certain holes and positions for top players in the farm. Again, you gotta have some lanes for some of these top prospects to come up. And that's also another thing that we never really allowed in the past. So again, all those things are very, very important. So let me know what you think. Like, subscribe. I will speak to everybody soon, and drop your comment.